I'm the U.S. Special Coordinator for Tibetan Issues, Uzra Zeya, and I'm thrilled to be here with ICT Asks. So I understand it is upon me to unveil the first question. So let her rip. Who is Under Secretary Zeya? What a great question. Great way to begin. Who am I? I am a proud mom, diplomat, citizen of the world, and in addition to being the Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights, I have the unique honor and privilege to be the U.S. Special Coordinator for Tibetan Issues. Oh, has Undersecretary Zeya ever visited Tibet? Short answer, no. I have not had the privilege to visit Tibet, but I have engaged on Tibet-related issues all over the world, including here in Washington, D.C., all over the country, and with partners literally in every region of the world. So what we've seen in recent years is increasing draconian restrictions by the government of the People's Republic of China, or PRC, on access to the Tibetan Autonomous Region and other Tibetan areas. And this was the rationale behind the bipartisan adoption by the U.S. Congress of RATA, the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act, where it is U.S. policy to seek and advocate for greater access to Tibetan areas of the PRC. Okay, let's see what's behind the blank card. Oh, a highly sensitive topic. What is Uzra Zeya's favorite Tibetan dish? Now, it's a sensitive topic because I don't want to play favorites, but I do have a favorite, and it is clearly momos. Okay, what is behind card number 4? Let's see. This is a long one. What has Undersecretary Zeya learned from visiting so many countries and cultures? Well, in my role as Undersecretary and Special Coordinator, I have visited 60 different countries in every region of the world. I think what I've come away with from those visits and conversations with senior government officials, with civil society leaders, with young people, with international media, it's a simple truth, and there is so much more that unites us than divides us as human beings. And when I look at the unique cultural, religious, and linguistic traditions of Tibetans, this issue of cultural preservation, this issue of the fundamental human rights to practice one's faith, to speak one's language, I truly believe these are universal, and I see in my engagements all over the world a real interest and a real growing solidarity in supporting these fundamental freedoms for all, and especially Tibetans. Okay, let's see what's under card number 5. What was Undersecretary Zeya's first meeting with His Holiness the Dalai Lama like? Wow. For me, it was truly an unforgettable, personal, spiritual, and professional experience to have that first audience where I heard firsthand from His Holiness about his unwavering commitment to peace, to tolerance, to greater understanding among peoples, and for the cultural preservation of the Tibetan language, of Tibetan Buddhism, and Tibetan culture itself. I came away from that meeting uplifted and ever more determined and motivated to carry out my mission as U.S. Special Coordinator for Tibetan Issues. Okay, let's see our next question. This is getting interesting. What are Undersecretary Zeya's key priorities in addressing the challenges faced by the Tibetan people? Well, let me explain kind of the 7 prongs of my mission as Special Coordinator. One is advancing the human rights of Tibetans all over the world. 2 is preserving the unique religious, cultural, and linguistic traditions of Tibetans. And this includes their ability to honor, to venerate, and select their own leaders. But the third aspect of my role as special coordinator is encouraging direct dialogue between the government of the People's Republic of China and His Holiness or his representatives without preconditions, and that this dialogue should lead towards meaningful autonomy for Tibetans that really preserves their unique cultural, religious, linguistic traditions, as well as their ability to practice their faith and select their leaders without any governmental interference. The fourth aspect of my mission as special coordinator is the issue of encouraging and advocating for greater access to the Tibetan Autonomous Region and other Tibetan areas. And sadly, we've seen increased PRC restrictions on access to Tibet, both for international actors, diplomats, journalists, but also for Tibetan diaspora communities as well. My fifth area of focus in my mission as special coordinator is highlighting the environmental dimension of Tibetan issues, and specifically water security, water resources. Many may not realize, but over 1.8 billion people across India, Pakistan, and Southeast Asia rely on the water resources emergent from the Tibetan Plateau for life itself. So this has been an increased area of U.S. State Department focus. We've done some terrific events over the last 2 years at Stockholm Water Week, as well as other international gatherings highlighting attention on this very important environmental dimension of Tibetan issues. The sixth area of focus in my role as special coordinator is the humanitarian dimension. And here I want to underscore the terrific work done by the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration at the State Department, as well as the U.S. Agency for International Development, in helping meet the humanitarian needs of Tibetan refugees and exile communities, particularly in India and Nepal, where we see the greatest concentration of this population. Our efforts have helped support educational, livelihood, and other programs that I was able to witness firsthand in my own visits to Dharamshala and Kathmandu, and it's an area of work of which I'm tremendously proud. And seventh and finally is the newest aspect of my mission as special coordinator, and that is countering PRC disinformation with respect to Tibetan culture, traditions, and leaders, including His Holiness. We see unrelenting disinformation flowing out of PRC sources and institutions trying to distort the very nature of Tibetan Buddhism and defame leaders within the Tibetan community, and including, of course, His Holiness, who is revered as an international champion of peace and tolerance and is, in fact, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate himself. How is the U.S. promoting human rights and religious freedom in Tibet? Well, we are working continuously to build international solidarity, to increase international solidarity in support of human rights and religious freedom in Tibet. Some of the ways I think you've seen that manifested is in the Universal Periodic Review of the human rights situation in the PRC this year. We saw more than 20 countries come forward and specifically mention their concerns over human rights abuses in Tibet in their interventions at the UPR, and that resulted in 24 Tibet-specific recommendations to which the PRC is going to be held to account. Another area where you see increased international solidarity is in G7 statements with respect to the human rights situation in China, where consistently over the last few years we've seen G7 leaders and foreign ministers highlight concerns, including with respect to Tibet. And I want to just make one closing point here, that in every U.S. high-level engagement, including at the leader level by President Biden, the United States is forthright in underscoring our concerns with respect to the human rights situation for Tibetans and the need for serious action and improvement. How does Under Secretary's role intersect with the broader U.S. human rights advocacy in China? Well, I see a direct line between our human rights advocacy with respect to Tibetan issues and our broader human rights agenda with respect to the PRC. The repression that we see of Tibetan identity, of Tibetan cultural, religious, linguistic practices is sadly echoed with respect to the PRC's policies in Xinjiang. It's echoed with respect to the strangulation of democracy in Hong Kong, and with the overall dearth in religious freedom across China, which has led the United States for many years to designate the PRC as a country of particular concern for its suppression of religious freedom. Okay. Can Under Secretary Zeya share insights in international Tibet advocacy? I've been really heartened to see increasing international solidarity with respect to U.S. human rights concerns on Tibet. We see that in statements that have come out of the Third Committee of the UN General Assembly. We've seen that in Human Rights Council affirmative resolutions with respect to cultural preservation. I saw that in visiting the Czech-hosted International Ministerial on Religious Freedom or Belief that was held in Prague last winter, where we did a number of events with Czech and Dutch and other partners, including ICT, I believe, highlighting the need for greater international solidarity and action with respect to suppression of fundamental freedoms and suppression of religious freedom in Tibet and for Tibetans writ large. Let's see what's next. What are Under Secretary Zeya's proudest achievements as Special Coordinator for Tibetan Issues? Well, I would say my proudest achievement is to be able to support the tremendous and absolutely inspiring resilience of Tibetans all over the world in advancing their human rights, the protection of their unique religious, cultural, linguistic traditions, and increasing international solidarity toward that end. I think we've seen this in our ability to ensure and secure mentions of Tibet in G7 and US-EU high-level statements, and outcomes in both the Human Rights Council on cultural preservation, but also on the overall human rights situation, joint statements issued year after year, where Tibet is at the forefront of our and international partners' highest level concerns with respect to PRC human rights practices. An additional achievement of which I'm proud is historic accountability measures taken by the United States. This was under the Biden-Harris administration, the first sanctions under the landmark Global Magnitsky Accountability Act, which have designated PRC officials specifically for their repression of Tibetans in the Tibet Autonomous Region. We also saw, under this administration, the first U.S. visa restrictions issued against PRC officials for their involvement in Tibetan boarding schools, which have forced nearly 1 million Tibetan children between the ages of 5 and 18 to leave their parents, to be sent to schools where they are unable to speak their native language or practice their religion or see their family regularly. And those visa restrictions were another landmark achievement of which I'm proud. Okay. What can we do to support Tibetan legislation and the Tibetan people? Well, I think this is a wonderful closing question because, in short answer, a lot more. I encourage you to support civil society organizations and Tibetan diaspora, community leaders and actors and young people who are working to keep these issues on the international agenda, and specifically the international human rights and environmental agenda. Take a look at some of the landmark bipartisan legislation that's come out of the US Congress. In an era of polarization, I'm so heartened to see bipartisan convergence producing outcomes like the Tibet Resolve Act, which President Biden was proud to sign into law earlier this year. And this added to my mission as special coordinator the all-important task of countering PRC disinformation with respect to Tibetans and Tibetan identity. I also commend to your audience members to get to know firsthand Tibetan culture, and we've tried to espouse that ourselves here at the U.S. Department of State. We're proud to host an annual Losar Tibetan New Year celebration where we bring together diaspora community members, partners across civil society, the U.S. Congress, and our own executive branch and diplomatic corps. And those are just some simple ways I think you can help carry out the important work being done by our U.S. Department of State, but partners, vital partners like ICT. Thank you.